Hello, well today is Budget Day here in Wellington, May the 16th, as Bill English delivered his fifth budget to the country. Anyone reading the budget will be able to see that this is a budget full of good news from the New Zealand economy's perspective. So this year a deficit of 6.3 billion, less than the 7+ billion that was anticipated. Next year a deficit that's less than 1% of GDP, under about $2 billion, and then back in surplus by 2014-15. That is a sign of the economic plan that the national government has had over the last 5 years. We've been very careful with new expenditure on behalf of New Zealanders, while at the same time putting more money into health and education, science and innovation. Just to give you a sense of what that difference looks like, in our last 5 budgets, we have had new expenditure of roughly about $250 million per year. Contrast that with the last 5 budgets under a Labour government, where the new expenditure was 10 times that size. So we've been making sure that New Zealand lives within our means, and that's very important because in the end, by doing that, we make sure that future generations of New Zealanders are not saddled with debt that we can no longer afford. There's good news in the budget when it comes to growth. In a number of fronts, we'll be making sure that over time there's a significant reduction in ACC levies now that we can afford to fund those. We'll be making sure there's more money for tourism, for science and innovation, other key growth aspects. So it's a positive budget when it comes to growing the economy. A focus of this budget is also in housing. So a lot of people say that that's an issue solely of the domain of Auckland and to a certain degree Christchurch, but that's in fact not true. New Zealanders from Kaitaia to Bluff pay for interest rates that are set by the Reserve Bank. And if there is unsustained or sustained housing price increases in a pinch point like Auckland, and that forces the Reserve Bank governor to consider that inflation is too high, then ultimately one of his responses is potentially to raise interest rates. They are the interest rates paid by every business around the country and every mortgage holder in the country. And so what you're seeing in the budget is a number of responses on the housing front, but one is an accord between Auckland and the government, and also the potential to have accords between other councils around the country, which will enable the freeing up of both green and brownfield sites to allow the development of houses along the normal demand curve that we would expect. So to give you an example with Auckland, over the last few years we've been building around about 4,000 new properties a year in Auckland, when the natural demand is something closer to 13,000. This accord sets down over the next 3 years that 39,000 new properties will be built in Auckland on a combination of greenfield and brownfield sites. So a good example of where we're seeing real positive addressing of a particular issue. The budget also looks at those who are in the most need in our community. In areas, for instance, like state housing, again in Auckland, we are spending hundreds of millions of dollars developing state houses that have 3 bedrooms at the moment, and making sure that we build a second or in the case of 4th or 5th bedroom onto that property. We're also allocating more money for what's been the very successful home ownership, home insulation program. So $100 million going into that over the course of the next couple of years. Very targeted at low income New Zealanders, making sure that they can have their home insulated, working alongside another provider to help them. There'll also be more money in the budget for tackling rheumatic fever, a disease which is fundamentally a third world disease in our country. More money going into other areas like a food and schools program, which we'll be in a position to announce more detail on over the next couple of weeks. So overall, this is a story of, I think, a positive budget for New Zealand, one that sets us on the right track. It is an example of 5 years of hard work through very challenging times. New Zealand has come through both the global financial crisis, the devastation of the Christchurch earthquakes, and a number of other factors like the most recent drought, I think in very strong shape. And the government can take credit for the fact that we are managing the economy amongst these very difficult conditions, but doing it in a way which is in the best interest of New Zealand. I firmly believe that the next decade will be one of great opportunity for New Zealand as we see strong growth out of Asia, and the real challenge for New Zealand is to make sure that our economy is both financially sound and very competitive. This budget ensures that New Zealand will meet those objectives, and there's a lot to be commended in it.